Good morning and welcome to this OTLA webinar titled Keeping Your Firm Productive with Web-Based Tools such as Zoom and Filevine. My name is Mike Santilli and I am pleased to host today's program featuring Charles Gluckstein of Gluckstein Personal Injury Lawyers and Juda Strawczynski of LawPRO. If you experience issues or need assistance with this webinar, you can contact the OTLA office by calling 905-639-6852. If we cannot accommodate your call at this time, please leave a message and an OTLA staff member will follow up with you. We will also be sharing the recording of this webinar with all OTLA members as soon as the recording becomes available. This program contains one Professionalism Hour. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar. Submit a question anytime using the questions panel right near the bottom of the GoToWebinar interface, and we will try to answer as many as possible at the end of the program. Our presenters have made a PDF copy of their slides and an additional handout available to you for today's presentation. You can find the PDF in the handout section of your GoToWebinar panel. I would like to take a moment to introduce our speakers for this webinar. Charles was called to the Ontario Bar in 1999 and held the office of President of the Ontario Trial Lawyers Association from 2013 to 2014. Since 2014, Best Lawyers International has consistently recognized him as a leader in the personal injury field. In 2014, he was awarded the Lexpert Zenith Award, Leading Lawyer in Practice Excellence, Personal Injury in Recognition of Thought Leadership, and for setting new standards for the personal injury bar. And in its annual comprehensive guide, the Canadian Legal Lexpert Directory has shown Charles as being repeatedly and consistently recommended by his peers in the area of personal injury for the Toronto area. Juda manages and promotes Practice Pro, LawPRO's innovative claims and risk management initiative, including identifying emerging claims and risk, resource creation, and outreach to the profession. Prior to joining LawPRO, he served as a policy counsel at the Law Society of Ontario, where he provided strategic counsel with respect to key issues facing the legal profession, including access to justice, professional regulation, governance, and legislative issues. Prior to that, Juda practiced litigation and served as a fellow at Physicians for Human Rights in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as president of Canadian Lawyers for International Human Rights from 2013 to 2018, and as a director of the Canada Millennium Scholarship Foundation. Juda has a Bachelor of Arts from McGill University in Humanistic Studies and International Development Studies, and is a Juris Doctorate from the University of Toronto. Mr. Gluckstein and Mr. Strawczynski, thank you for being with us today, and I welcome you to the program.
Good morning, everyone. Just going to make sure you're seeing the right screen. Just make sure this is working. Good. Happy Pandemic Friday to everyone, and I hope you're all staying safe. And I encourage you to use the chat window to let me know any questions you have along the way. It would be great for us to get feedback and to be able to focus in on tools that you would like to learn about. A lot of my topic is very technical. Many of you who've seen me present before, I love technology, and I've embraced some of these tools, and I'm going to tell you how I use them productively, and Juda's going to comment on some of the security issues that have come up with working from home, and some ways that you can protect yourself and your clients' data. And we're going to hopefully have a good back and forth question and answer period as we go along, and certainly at the end. So I'm going to start off just by telling you what I've done for my firm. If you don't know about me and my background, I practice personal injury in Toronto. We have about 35 in staff, and we have a Toronto office, although we do have 5 or 6 people who work remotely out of the office. And so we've had an opportunity to look at our technology and make sure that those people were able to work productively from home. And we built on that success in order to sort of survive during this time of isolation. And I can tell you some of the things that I've done. So this may be what your home office looks like. And so what I plan to speak about is, how a good home office setup should look, what kind of telephone and video conferencing solutions are out there, and how to choose the one for you. What kind of security issues should you think about? Zoom has had a lot of attention on that issue, so I'll highlight that, and then Juda will tell you some more answers about how LawPRO thinks of that concern. Which apps that I've been sort of honing in on that have worked the best for our firm, and how to track what I think is another important concern that often lawyers forget is keeping your eye on the business side of your practice, and certainly during this time where it's hard to get new clients, how to make sure you're staying productive. So this is a sample home office. Actually, it shows a standing desk that I'm using. It's not my standing desk, but that is, you've got multiple screens, which is always very useful to have to stay productive when you're working in a more digital environment, which I would assume you have to in this environment, because you're not going to bring all your files home from storage. You have to have some kind of digital file to work on, and so it's nice to have the multiple screens. Certainly if you're doing video conferencing, or if you're doing any word processing, drafting documents, you're going to want to have multiple screens. I have 2 monitors and in a similar setup. So this is my setup. You can see 2 screens, standing desk, a headset, and the web camera. I like this kind of web camera that sits on top of the monitor. A lot of people use the web camera from their laptop. I'll tell you why that's not a preferred web camera. Unless you've got the laptop at eye level, often it's looking up at you, and it looks like, it doesn't look as professional as if you have it at eye level, or even a little bit above, where you can get a very good professional look, especially if you're speaking to clients, you're doing a mediation by video conference, or as they're talking about e-hearings with the court. You're going to want to make sure the camera is in the right position. And also lighting is important. So I'll just take a moment to talk about that. Even in this picture where you see me, I have a pretty dim lit office, but I have a window in front of me, and that gives you frontal lighting. It's very important to think about these things, because on camera, you may see oftentimes when you're doing calls with people that they're all silhouetted, and that's because the lighting's coming from behind. So make sure that you've got the right lighting as well. Let's talk about teleconferencing and the solution. So we are on a Bell system at the office. And what we had to do to make it work is we bought a switch that allowed the phones to be forwarded to our receptionist's home, and she could then run the lines, essentially forwarding all the calls to people's cell phone numbers without giving out the cell phone numbers. That worked temporarily, and then I actually looked at a voice over IP solution. I was already investigating it at the time of the pandemic, so I was pretty much done with my decision. I had investigated. Mitel has an option, which is in Canada. Ring Central is a U.S. solution, and Zoom also has a Canadian voice over IP solution, in addition to their video conferencing, which gets a lot of publicity. And so it's about $15 a user for unlimited calling in North America. And they do have a Canadian server, which is a very important consideration. And voice over IP is very attractive, because you still have, you can pick up all the phone calls wherever you are, and no one would know the difference as to your location. So, we can be working from home even after the pandemic, and it would still seem like the office is calling the client. So it also picks up from your cell phone. So Zoom has an app on your cell phone, and you can use the phone from there, and you're not giving up your cell phone number. It has teleconferencing, and it also can allow it to convert to a video call. So that's why we went with Zoom. Zoom also, just if anyone's interested, bought out our Bell contract. I don't think that's confidential. They actually promote that. Ring Central was not willing to do that. We were locked in on a 3-year deal with Bell, and so Zoom essentially gives us free service for 3 years. So this is how the Zoom app looks. I'm going to talk about Zoom first and then go into Filevine and Domo. So Zoom, if you're not aware of Zoom, this will give you a good introduction into it. The app is very similar on your computer as it is on your cell phone. And it looks, the app works like your cell phone does, except you're using the Zoom phone number. It sounds great. It doesn't require internet on your phone to work. It works through the cell as well. So or your data, I guess it is your data. So it doesn't require Wi-Fi is what I should have said. And so it has these features at the top. You can see there's a home feature, chat, make a phone call. You wouldn't see that phone icon if you're just using the video conferencing right now. Meetings, you can set up meetings and you can bring in your contact list. You can download it from the App Store, and you can also download it from the Zoom website for your computer, whether it's Mac or PC. I use a Surface computer at work, and I use and so I have it, and then I have an iPhone, so it works on both quite easily. All the features will work the same. So you could start a new meeting instantly, or you can schedule one in advance. You can also do it from Outlook. I'll show you that in a moment. And you can continue all the chats. So we have our internal office chat. We've moved it off Outlook, email. I don't want people communicating about office anything through email. I'd rather them do it from the chat. We have enough stuff in our email boxes. I try to get all inter-office communication outside of the email, so people aren't, hitting reply to all 100 times, which clutters up your email. And actually, in addition to that, to keep things light, we started a WhatsApp chat for our office so that, the people are sending the jokes around, etc. Do that off email and do it off your Zoom chat or whatever other chat services. Do it through WhatsApp. That's how we've set it up. And so this is just an example of what a chat looks like. And obviously, you can go through and set up specific chats with groups. And so, we had a fundraiser for COVID-19 for a hospital. We started a COVID-19 chat, things like that. A lot of people want to know, how do I customize and change all my settings on Zoom? So if you go back, there is a little settings wheel and a picture icon you see at the top right corner of this slide. That'll take you to this screen, which allows you to decide all these features. So if you go under audio, you can pick your audio settings, your microphone settings, and then a little further down, you'll see the virtual background selection, and that one, so there's audio. You choose your speakers, you can test your audio. You really should do that before you get on a Zoom call. It's the worst way to start a meeting is, can you hear me? Can you see me? And then 20 minutes into the call, everyone's still trying to get through the technical issues. Try to get comfortable with those technical issues before you get on a call, especially if it's a mediation or discovery that you're doing by video conference or a e-hearing. Get all these things ironed out before. I suggest using a virtual background if you think you're going to have a distraction, not a virtual background like the ones that Zoom gives you, but go to the web. I've picked out, 5 or 10 very, bland, backgrounds that don't distract the person that's watching the video of you, so that, for instance, my setup is backed onto my kitchen. And so my kids, my dogs, they're all going to run around in the background. I wear a headset so they can't hear anything from the communication. And if you're looking at me and you see that, you're going to be distracted. But if I put a virtual background on, it shields. It's like a curtain that goes behind me, just like this example here. And you won't see any of that. There are amazing office backgrounds that make you look like you're in your office, that you're in a den with a pile of books behind you. You can do whatever you like. There's so many different pictures. Basically, you just cut and paste it, save it somewhere, and that little plus icon on the virtual background will say add an image or add a video. I've seen people add videos of, work settings behind them. You can get that from YouTube, or you can add an image, and then you can just add it to this list here and select it, and that'll become your background. Setting up a meeting is quite easy in Outlook. There is a plugin that you have to download. You can search Zoom for Outlook on the web, and you'll find the download. And then you run the script on your Outlook, and then you'll get these two icons that allow you to set up meetings. And then in the Zoom it'll program it into the appointment, and then you can invite others into the meeting so that they have the link. And there's a lot of controversy about those links. And Zoom was criticized because their default setting was to use what's called your meeting ID, which is really like your phone number. And that meeting ID, if that defaulted there, that means that that meeting ID, if anyone else has it, they can get into your meeting at any time. And so what happened during, people starting to go into isolation is people were having fitness classes on Zoom, and they were promoting their classes on Instagram and YouTube. And of course, that's like giving out your phone number. So people were dialing up those numbers, and they were popping into Zoom meetings, and then they were doing what's called video bombing, sharing their screen, because the default, again, allows you to share your screen. So Zoom has corrected all these problems, and now it defaults to a unique ID that's not your meeting ID, and it also requires a password. So that criticism was answered. And secondly, it does not default to allowing others to share your screen, so that people somehow who get into the meeting would not be able to all of a sudden show their own video, which is what was happening. So that's been corrected for anyone who's concerned about that. Now, I've been on the e-hearings committee with the court, and we've spent a lot of time developing a practice manual for the profession as to what the proper etiquette is for e-hearings. And I would suggest this for all your video conferencing. That guide is going to come out shortly, and I know LawPRO has one, and I'm going to let Juda talk about it after I get through some of these slides. But there's just some basic things that come on. For instance, we're 50 or so people on this call, and I've had a few with 40, and I'm sure you guys have been involved in them, where there's all these screens, and it's very hard to control the meeting. So there are some default settings that allow the host to mute all, but if that's not happening, there is some sort of etiquette that occurs where you can raise your hand either visually, where you put it up on the camera, or you can do it in a chat forum where there's a place to raise a hand, and then the speaker will come to you, or the host will come to you in order of who raised their hand. It's important, you see the screens light up as to who's speaking, or sometimes on certain other video conferencing programs, only the speaker is visible, and it's very hard to know when your turn is. So generally, you should stay muted until you're ready to speak. Unless, I wear a headset, so I don't have any background noise, but a lot of people will have their cell phones with them, and you hear the ringing or the texting, or if they're on a speakerphone, you hear all the chimes go off on the computer when they get new emails, or they have a dog barking, or the doorbell's ringing, whatever it is. All of those distractions should be muted, and that way the call can go very efficiently. I've talked about sort of your own appearance and lighting, and obviously you should dress appropriately. I had a mediation on Tuesday. Everyone was laughing at me in the house because I was essentially wearing a suit, and typically I wear business casual for working at home, but this was the right way to be for a mediation, so that's how I did it. Some other tips: you should make sure your connection is good. So even for this call, I am using Wi-Fi, but I did decide to plug in. I have a cord going across 2 rooms right now so that I don't lose my connection. And I would suggest, for important meetings, etc., that you need the video conferencing, make sure you're plugged in, both your computer, your monitors, and your Wi-Fi or your internet connection is very strong. The problem with Wi-Fi is it's fickle, and even if you have the strongest version of Bell or Rogers or whatever, I find with everyone using the internet, the pressure on the system is very difficult. Close all your other programs on your computer, because what happens is there may be an opportunity where you do want to share your screen, like I'm doing right now. Actually, during our e-hearings call the other day, one of the individuals wanted to share a website, and it turned out we were on his browser and saw a whole bunch of other windows open that I don't think he wanted us to see, and it was probably embarrassing for that user. So if you're going to be on a call where you're going to share your screen, try to close all your other programs. Obviously, there's a confidentiality issue. If you have emails open and you're working on a project of one of your clients, you don't want to show that either. So when you start a meeting, generally it's going to look like this on Zoom. Now, we're on GoToMeeting right now, and there's WebEx and there's Skype, and they all have their different technology. So I'm not going to be able to go through all of them. We did use Skype for a period of time, and I know there's controversy about, Zoom and some insurers not using it, but the court is preferring Zoom right now, and Zoom seems to be the most user-friendly because it is available on all platforms. You can phone in, you can use it on an iPhone. It's an easy app to get. Skype requires you to sign in and give a whole profile. GoToMeeting is a paid application that you'd have to download in order to participate in. And WebEx, I think, is also a very expensive solution. So Zoom has been very popular for that reason. So essentially, you see this screen. You can join for audio, so you can just listen in. You can also click the link and join with your video, and you can also share your screen and invite other people to the meeting. And then when you get into the meeting, you will see this screen, which allows it to be computer audio or phone call. So you can choose how you want to connect, if you want to connect through your computer or through using a landline. And then at the bottom of the screen, you'll see some of the features that the host will have, and sometimes the host gives these features to the people that are participating. So you can use the join audio, and the arrow next to it allows you to play with the settings the similar way that I showed you through your profile settings. So even on the call, you can play with your settings. Same thing with the video. You can start the video with a one touch, or you can press the arrow up if you're having some video camera issues and you want to choose a different camera. Invite allows you to send that other people to the meeting. Manage participants is the way to see the chat on the Zoom. So just like we see there's a chat window for our GoToMeeting here, you would have a similar window on the right of Zoom, which allows you to see all the participants. You can talk to them privately. You can talk to the group. Sometimes if you open the option, you can poll them and find out if they like what you're talking about. You can share your screen from the share button. And that arrow allows you to choose which thing you're sharing. You can go right to the chat with the chat function. You can record the meeting. And that was another security critique, and I'll tell you how they've corrected that. But that was the issue, is that they were concerned about where that recording was being stored. The CEO from Zoom has answered that question, but I'll go through it. And then the breakout rooms, which you will be using when you go to Zoom mediations and other meetings, they will put you in other groups so that you're grouped together, and you'll have 4 people in room 1, 4 people in room 2, and then the mediator will float between the different rooms. This is just an example of how I set up my audio. So I'm using a Plantronics headset, and I just pick both the speaker and the microphone. You have to pick both. And then this is an example of what it looks like when you pick a recording. So at the top left corner, all the users on the call will see that recording button, and they'll know they're being recorded. So that is important for the users to know. It's their warning that, hey, you're being recorded. There isn't right now a place for you to say, I consent, but at least you do know it's being recorded, and you can say, hey, why is this being recorded? And certainly if you are going to record a call, you should tell everyone on the call that you plan to record it, and if you're going to share it, et cetera, and how you're going to store it. When you hit record, Zoom tells you, do you want to save it locally on your computer, or do you want us to save it in our server, and we'll send you a link? They've confirmed that they don't have any access to that video. Whether you trust them or not is another issue. If you don't, you can just save it to your own computer. Of course, that's going to take up your drive, whereas if you subscribe to them, they'll store it for you unlimited, and that uses their storage. So I haven't had an issue with that. This is the security icon that they've now added to the bottom of your screen when you use Zoom, and it's automatically ticked off for share screen. So you have to check that you want to share the screen. I just showed that example. And Also, the issue was that people were entering meetings naming themselves as someone other than themselves. You can prevent that from happening by unticking the rename themselves. You can also lock the meeting at the top, you see. So once the meeting starts, nobody else can get in. So even though it said you could invite others, they wouldn't be able to get in. Or you could enable a waiting room, which allows them to hold there until you screen them and tell them to come in. This is great for a meeting with 3 or 4 or 5 people. When you get to 40 or 50 people, it's going to be very distracting when people come late and you're notified someone's in the waiting room. You may not want that feature. And then when you want to share your screen, it lets you share a whole bunch of things. You can share, and it's similar to GoToMeeting. You can share different screens, desktop 1, desktop 2. You could go to an actual picture, like an actual program, so it doesn't share your whole screen, only the program that you want to share. You can have a whiteboard where you can collaborate and things like that. If you really want to get advanced, go back to that profile page. There are some shortcuts you can use with keyboard strokes. You can also change the size of the wording for accessibility. You can increase it if you want larger font. So you can even get more tricked out if you want to go super advanced. You go to your profile page, which was that top right corner, and you can change your photo. But if you hit settings, it's going to take you to the Zoom website. And on the Zoom website, if you go into your account, there are about 30 or 40 other settings that you can play with. And you can see all the screens that come up. And that is where I would tell you, if you really want to go advanced and learn more about Zoom, you can go into that account page and play with all the different features. And there are lots of videos on Zoom that tell you about much more than what I've told you. So you just go to Zoom support and you can play around with all the stuff that they teach you about. The other program that I want to quickly turn to is that's kept us productive. So we've talked a lot about video conferencing and teleconferencing, but my case management solution that I've been using is Filevine, and I find that that's a really, really great collaborative team exercise or team way to work through files. These are obviously just standard screenshots from the program, not my program. So these aren't real clients. This is their demo. And so what you see is you almost get a feed, which is similar to looking at your Facebook feed. And this would be all the projects that you're following. So if you have 40, 50 clients and your staff are working on those clients during the day, every entry that they put in will show up on your feed. The feed is different than tasks. There's another button on the right there at the top, which would just be things that they've asked your feedback on. So the feed gets pretty busy during the day. For instance, my feed may have 120 items per day, but I may only get 10 or 15 tasks. So if I really want to see what's important, people are going to set up tasks for me to say, is this letter okay to go out? Can I tell the client X, Y, and Z? Anything like I'm setting up the discovery, is this a 1-day or 2-day? Anything you need to know about your projects that they're waiting for your input should go into the tasks versus the feed, which is where you see all the activity going on the file. Now, I've been able to sign up. There's not a lot of, obviously, new car accidents during this time, which is a good thing for society. Hasn't been, and I'm sure everyone who's practicing in motor vehicle, we're going to notice a downtake in terms of new clients when it comes to, as soon as we start working through the cases we have, there's not going to be a lot of new inventory. However, I also practice in medical malpractice, and we have done some new sign-ups, and we use Filevine to do a virtual intake. So I have a form that we can do right online, and it will generate documents such as retainers and authorizations that we then send out, and we get them to virtually sign, and I'll talk about that quickly. So you can see how that form is set up. This is what we've talked about already, the project feed. You can see a little bit better how the screen looks. On the left side, you can drill into the activity. This is the feed actually within one case. So previously I showed you your feed for all of your cases. If you were to click one of your cases, you would be into a general feed just for that case. And then you would see all the tabs that tell you different aspects of that client. And on the top right, you would see a drop down, which is what I call the vitals. And that would tell you, for instance, the date of loss and all the inputs that are tracking the status of that case. So you can see, the type of case it is. And then also on the right, we also put a phase. So we would see what phase the case is in. And Filevine has automatic tasks that generate depending on what phase you're in. So staff will work on different aspects of the case depending on what phase they're in. And this is what a task would look like. So within a task, you will tell the person, get this out by next week, and then you can put in the date. And these would be all the tasks for that user. And at the bottom, you can see an auto-generated task given by Filevine. You can text message through Filevine, which is great. Another way to communicate with your client without cluttering up your email. We try to keep everything out of email. Email is the first place they hack. And text messaging, you get a unique text number for every client in Filevine, and then we send a text to the client, and every time they want to update us, it goes right into the project feed. It also will go, so you'll see that update, and everyone who's involved in that project will get that update. You can generate documents. So I mentioned that, once you've done the intake, send out the retainer, and they can virtually sign it. You can generate whatever documents that you want through there. And then I'm going to talk quickly about, so actually before I get there, I'll just talk about the virtual signatures. So the courts have ruled that virtual signatures are acceptable during this pandemic. They've allowed certainly photocopied signatures or a picture of a signature, and they also have allowed, and I'm talking about commission documents, virtual commissioning. And so it depends, I guess, on how contested the issue is, but we have been using a product that's integrated with Filevine called VineSign, which is essentially the same as DocuSign, which many of you would be familiar with, but it comes integrated with Filevine. It's their sort of DocuSign answer. Works exactly the same. You send the document to the client securely to their cell phone, and they can sign it. There's an authentication document that gives the IP address that comes with the signature back to you, and you can use that as proof of the signature. I've had a bunch of settlements during the pandemic, and insurers have agreed to accept the virtual signature through VineSign. They've also accepted a PDF signature, so when someone inserts their signature on a PDF, they've accepted that, and there's been some rulings that also allow for that to occur. So, I think technology is important, and it's important to have all these things going so that you can try to run your practice as normal as possible, which is hard to do. Another thing that comes integrated with Filevine is Domo. Domo's like a tech company that's publicly traded. It's very good at analytics, and it's amazing when you tap this into Filevine. All those data points that I was showing you become charts. So you can see how many tasks your staff are doing and completing, and you can see all the projects and what stage they're in, the phases of all your cases. You can check the revenue of your firm on a daily snapshot. It's very, very powerful tool. And I have about 20 of these Domo charts. And you could ask me anything about my business, and I feel like I'm very informed because of this data. So, for instance, we track referral sources. So I can see at a moment's notice how many cases came in from the internet, whether we signed them up, or what kind of revenue we generated from those referral sources. We can track the lawyer's productivity, how well they're doing with their cases, and on and on and on. Everything you think, that's a data point, you can track. I am trying to integrate my accounting software so that I can also track, disbursements and payables and dockets and the WIP on each file, and integrate that with Filevine and Domo. So I think once you go web-based with a lot of your practice tools, you'll find that you can be really, really self-sufficient. So another tip, like we use a third-party medical records company that will get us medical records, and they will use the virtual signature. So just as an example, I go to one of these intakes and I take in the client information. They sign the authorization to get medical records. There's a company called MedChart that will take that authorization for both the OHIP records and the medical records, and they will get all the medical records. Just with a click of a button, you can get it all from your desktop, and they will follow up and get the records provided to you digitally. And so you can get, and then we have an integration with Filevine as well. They've created, so we get notified in Filevine that there is a new record. You can see the record, and you can again deliver the record from Filevine securely to other counsel through a secure link, or you can use companies like Tracument and securely send those records along. We try not to send any records as a PDF in an email. We send a secure link, which requires a password, and then they can either view it on their screen or download it based on the fact that they had that authorization. So really, those who invested in technology early are going to benefit and be able to still work productively now. It's not too late. A lot of this stuff can still be done, like the video conferencing, teleconferencing. There are people that are doing integrations with Filevine now, even during this time. So even if you had data in a server, as long as it can be transferred, that integration is happening. So those are some of the tips that I have, and I think I'd like to leave some time for Juda to go through his suggestions for you. So I'll just pass the screen over at this point.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate. And, Charles has done a fantastic overview of one approach for going from intake through to settlement in a virtual manner, which is fantastic. For those of you who aren't fully digital yet, I agree entirely with Charles that this is something that you can build out incrementally. And if you do have a downturn in your practice right now, that is time that can be spent building systems so that you are able to take advantage of some of the tools that are available. I am the Director of Practice Pro at LawPRO, and we are a claims prevention and practice management program that tries to help the profession practice in ways that reduce risk. And so we have all sorts of resources that we've been building out in this time. We just wanted to show you the main screen for Practice Pro, and we have a new hot topic area here for COVID-19. It's got a lot of different resources now that build on what Charles was talking about. You'll see, for example, we've got this area here, the using technology for lawyer-client communications, and we've got all sorts of little guides. So we've got an article. I'm not going to read it to you, but I encourage you to have a look. It's 10 tips for effective video conferencing. A lot of the things that Charles was talking about are technology neutral, whether you're using Zoom or GoToMeeting or talking with a client via FaceTime because that's what they have access to at the moment, or whatever other video conferencing technology you may be using. There are a few just key tools. Charles talked about them, checking your confidentiality, checking and troubleshooting as we had to do before even today's video presentation, and helping people who may be using their tech for the first time. Because you're a legal service provider, there are also a few things to be mindful of in terms of how you're using your tech. So in addition to the article on how to use tech generally and your tips for an effective meeting, there's also a checklist that we've circulated already, a video conferencing checklist for lawyers. The Law Society of Ontario, the regulator, as you know, has relaxed some requirements to allow for virtual practicing more easily during this time. If you go to their COVID-19 page, which I recommend you do frequently, they are keeping the profession up to date about what the standards are and talking about things that you should be doing. Based on their guidance, we've developed a Word or PDF document which you can develop as you see fit, and it's in the handouts. But the key there is that it is a structured way to follow along and make sure that you are meeting the requirements that the Law Society would like you to maintain around making sure that you've got contemporaneous documentation of your meetings and that the connection is good, that your client is comfortable doing the video conference with you, and that everyone is proceeding collectively in the video conference. We have an alert to the profession about how we're continuing to operate. We are accepting payment deferral. There are some details that you can check out on lawpro.ca or practicepro.ca about that. But ultimately, what the key message I'd like to mention here is if you are pausing practice, have a practice issue, or are concerned about a potential fraud, we're open for business and you can reach out at any time. In terms of our other resources available, there are also some tech tips that we have developed, and I'm just going to close and open up to one of them. We've just released this chart, which talks about some of the different technologies that are available. We don't formally endorse any of these, but they're for you to explore, and we've tried to create different categories so that you can think about what you need as you build out your practice. And so we've got calendaring tools and different tools for workflow. We've got the document signing. We've got a couple of the bigger ones right now, Adobe Sign and DocuSign. As Charles noted, some of the solutions that are available for practice management, Filevine being one, will have their built-in e-signature platform. So part of this is making sure that while you build your puzzle, you don't need to stack technologies. If you have one e-signature that works, you don't need another. If you've got one time management system for your firm so that everyone is following your ticklers and making sure you're not missing deadlines, you don't need a second system. In fact, you should only have one to avoid risk of error. So we've got firm management software, note-taking options, which is really helpful as you move towards e-discoveries and virtual trials. Some payment solutions. LawPay works with trust accounting for this particular audience working on contingency fees. These are less important, but might be helpful for accepting reimbursements from others. And we've got some other just general editing and other pieces that you can go. So feel free to come and download these. We do have some specific litigation tools. TrialPad is a great tool. Charles could talk and has talked and presented on this in the past. It's a great tool. SiteRight is offering free access right now, and they're providing hyperlinks with factums and other cool ways to streamline some of the court processes and your advocacy. So lots of different things to explore in this guide, and we're going to make it a living tree. So you can feel free to go to practicepro.ca for updates. We're looking at a few other products that we're thinking of adding in. I also have a general article with some of the work from home tech tips, everything from the 101 about your hardware, your computer, the external monitors, how to get comfortable as much as possible to try to work remotely, and then into some of the other documents that you'll need for video conferencing on the cloud. Again, all available from our Hot Topic COVID-19 page. And at the same time, be mindful of cyber. Charles mentioned that, and we're seeing some specific, rather unfortunate efforts where fraudsters are trying to prey on vulnerable people during these difficult times of transition. So we have been maintaining cybersecurity updates. They appear on our Avoid a Claim blog, which you can follow. You can also report a fraud if you see something through it. But these claims, if they are COVID specific, are also going to come up on our COVID-19 article page on practicepro.ca. So feel free to stay alert, stay in mind there around particular risks, but at the same time, feel free to continue to check Practice Pro for resources, and for questions or for fraud concerns, it's business as usual for us. You can reach out to me directly or call our customer service line, and they'll put you in touch with the right department. So thanks again for having us. I think it's great that OTLA is putting these sessions together. We're all learning about our tech, and one of the best resources for that is to talk to your peers, because there are different solutions, and every firm and every individual is going to have their own comfort level. But by talking with each other, you'll understand better what's working for each of you, what are the concerns you're finding, and be able to work through your expertise and sharing knowledge to make sure that you're all comfortable as this progresses. And we're there to try to assist with that. So thanks again. I want to leave some time for questions. So why don't I wrap up with that for the time being. Thanks again for having me. And Mike, the screen's yours.
Yeah, I did. It's Charles. I don't know if I'm on. Judah, that's a great, thank you for all that information. On the issue of security, so I had to deal with, and I'm still dealing with security issues. We often put a lot of our programs in Citrix. I think a lot of you guys probably are aware of how Citrix protects you as a VPN when you're logging in, and it has some of a gatekeeper function. And now we're seeing a lot of software available through the web, like Microsoft 360, this program Filevine. A lot of things are web-based, which don't allow you, well, I guess you can still run them through Citrix, but they're so convenient. You know, you can run them on your iPad. Sometimes Citrix is a little clumsy when you take it off the computer screen. And so what I've done and implemented as a way to think about security threats is a lot of these services will offer two-factor authentication, just like your banking software or your banking
Absolutely.
sites. And I've started to do it. I found it very convenient. You're going to have your cell phone with you anyway, and so you log on to your program. I think from working from home, the threats are much more than when you're at the office. And you know, you log on. It says put your second code in. Apple was doing that anyway with when you signed into your Apple devices. And so Filevine offers that. A lot of other Domo offers that. And so I've been implementing that as a secondary security issue because I think that locks it down quite well. Any other thoughts about that, Judah, in terms of the security issues and logins and trusting your staff from working from home and things like that?
Absolutely. So let's start with the electronic, and then we'll talk about some of the human factor risks because those are big as well. So just so you know, we use Citrix. It's wonderful. We have two-factor identification to log in. I'm sent a text to my phone, or I can get the server to call me. It doesn't really matter which one you use. Either way, make sure that you've got a second verification to confirm to LawPRO that it's actually me trying to log in today. If somebody stole my password, which would be a hard thing to do given how I keep my passwords, but if they were able to guess my password or find it somehow, they still need to find my phone. So that's a bank level security system. Great to hear that groups like Filevine are offering that. Wherever possible, two-factor authentication is amazing. In terms of two-factor authentication, I want to mention as well that it's something that even if you're in the office is really important for some of your processes. One of the areas where we see fraud successfully pulled off in is where there's a bad check scheme or money that's being redirected out of trust, and it's either a partner's email being faked or being replicated if somebody has actually hacked your system, or where somebody is otherwise trying to purport to be you. So imagine if it's Charles saying to clerk, you know, and by Charles, I mean fake Charles. Fake Charles sends an email either by hacking through into Charles's email and watching for a settlement that's coming, or somebody who's got a similar email to Charles's, who's then writing the clerk directly and saying, on this matter, change in instruction, please e-file, send by electronic payment to this account instead of normal. And we've seen this in real estate. We've seen this in other transactions. If the clerk just picks up the phone every time or walks down the hall every time to confirm that instruction, that's a form of dual authentication, and that will stop that fraud. Because then Charles will say, that was not me. What's going on? Not a step further until we can sort this out. And so, go ahead.
Yep. No, I agree. And what we have seen, and I'm sure a lot of you are seeing more of during this pandemic, is emails coming from familiar email addresses saying, click this link, because so many people are using secure links to send. And so you'll see a familiar email name, and they don't show the email address until you click it. So you'll get an email from Joe, and it says, I need your help urgently, or, did you see my previous message? If not, click here. And then there's a web link, and that's like a virus, essentially. So don't click those. And I've told my staff that's why I don't want them using email. But of course, when you're sending out a document, you are sending to someone. You'll say, here's 5 files on giving the initials for the file name. And you'll say, click this link. The password is going to be the date of birth or whatever it is. I don't get those fake emails, but I will get a lot of people from a familiar name send, you didn't respond to me, click this link. But my instinct now is to hover over the name of the person, because then you'll see the email address. And the email address will look nothing like the name. And so I think our staff have had enough of these that they're educated that that's a trick we can avoid. But of course, the first one that comes in, someone quickly clicks it, and then your whole system is hacked.
No, that's right.
So security is an issue there.
Security is for sure an issue. And if we jump back in, even at LawPRO, my CEO got an email now with a Dropbox type link. And fraudsters are recognizing that people are moving to virtual, and they're trying to exploit that. So we actually have an article about that, about some of the COVID-19 risks. We actually adapted a message that Gowling sent out to its lawyers about some of the things they were seeing, which combines some of the things we were seeing. But generally speaking, it's a good time. It's as good a time as any to review our fraud prevention pieces. So if you go to practicepro.ca, you'll see under hot topics, right under the COVID-19 articles, we've got our cyber dangers and fraud prevention links. And cyber dangers, we've got lots there around how people are trying to exploit weaknesses to successfully phish you or ransomware you. And our Avoid a Claim blog has been pushing out the sorts of dangers we're seeing in real time. So for example, in Manitoba, a couple of firms were just victims of a ransomware attack. And so if you continue to follow us either via Twitter or by following Avoid a Claim by RSS feed, you can get right onto the hottest dangers that are out there. But at the end of the day, with people moving to work from home, with some uncertainties or changes in processes, fraudsters are trying to find their way in. So the recommendation, of course, is as you're integrating, as you're moving along, you want to make sure that there's dual authentication wherever you can, that passwords are robust, that staff know not to click on links, and that if there's ever a change involving money, or if anything is involving money, make sure you've got at least a dual authentication process for your firm. I will say also for staff, I know it's a difficult time, and we like to trust everyone in our firms as we hopefully can, but making sure that staff are taking their vacation through COVID making sure that people are taking at least 5 consecutive days off so that you can check for payment trends or other things in their absence. Those are sort of industry standard type things that you want to do while there's money moving around, just to make sure there are no internal problems. Certainly, if you're able to do that, that's great. On staffing as well, it is a very trying time for people out there. This isn't just working from home. This is working from home in a pandemic. People have kids, people have dependents, people have family members. They may be in not just a sandwich generation, but a sandwich generation where now the game has shifted in terms of how they caregive. Mental health is going to be a big stressor across the board, not just for you, but for your clients and even for your adjuster, for the insurance defense lawyer on the other side, or the insurance company itself. So we're all going to have to just be mindful of that. But for you and for your staff, we do have some mental health resources on practicepro.ca. Just think of it as another issue for your staff and another, not just a risk area, but an area where you can show leadership and support and just check in on your team. Make sure that they're taking time off, because everyone for the first 5 weeks has probably been working really hard to get you ready and embrace this wave. But it's clear that this is going to be not just one big wave. We're going to see ripples across the entire system for some time. So you want to make sure that people are taking their breaks, because this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint.
That's a really, really good point. Good points. And I actually spoke to our staff through the video conferencing. We had a sort of a town hall, and mentioned that, you know, the other aspect of running a business is the last thing you want is when you reopen in September, everyone going on vacation for a month. That's not going to help you either. So not only should they do it for their own mental health, but even for your business to continue, they should stagger their vacations. And I asked them to start taking days off during this time. You know, obviously not to use up all their vacation time, but, you know, take a day off every week, just stagger them so that we can manage, you know, the rest of the year, basically. There was one question before we wrap up. People were asking about document management in Filevine and whether they have the same ability to mark up a document as you'd find in, say, PrimaFact. We do use PrimaFact. I didn't mention PrimaFact because it's not as new a tool, and I figured a lot of you are used to it. We're still using PrimaFact for our document management, and it does have a sync with Filevine to bring documents over and task documents and use it in your activity feed. I know that Filevine opened up a document management tool last summer, and it's pretty good, and I am using it as well. I'm testing it out. And it doesn't have as many features as PrimaFact. It does have optical character recognition, so you can search within an image, which is great, just like PrimaFact. It's certainly not the same filing system that you'll see in PrimaFact. And in terms of marking up a document, what I've been told, there are some Filevine users in Ontario that use Adobe Pro, which is, I think, a $15 subscription. It's not very expensive, I think. I think if you get it through a batch, and you can do everything you can do in PrimaFact in terms of highlighting and commenting, signing. All those features come up in Adobe Pro, which then gets saved to Filevine, and then of course your highlights will be saved. But it is a step out. I did speak to the Filevine people, and apparently there is a new update coming out which will allow highlighting within the document and some other document management tools to encourage you to use that feature in Filevine. But of course, direct any questions about Filevine or any of the technology topics to me. I'm happy to spend time with any of you talking about it offline anytime. So I'll offer that out. And I think that's the end of our time. So appreciate that we've had a good group today, and hope you guys are staying safe and healthy, and at least you get to spend a lot more time with your family, which is nice. And hopefully the weather will be nicer so we can spend time outside too.
It's going to be warmer this weekend. We'll all take advantage. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and stay safe, everyone.
Great.
Well, thank you both very much for that. That was really informative and such valuable information as we all adjust to working from home. Thank you to the attendees for joining us today. We have a number of great webinar series planned for this year, including a trial series, examination series, SAB series, and ABC series. We encourage you to take advantage of our webinar subscription package. You can purchase 5 webinars or 3 webinars at a reduced rate to help you cover all your CPD needs for 2020. Our next webinar is on Thursday, April 23rd, and is titled Automated Driving and the Future of Auto Tort. And on Tuesday, April 28th, we have a webinar titled The ABCs of WSIB. You can find more details in the full events list on outla.com by clicking on Calendar under the CLE and Events tab of our main menu. Just another big thank you to Charles and Juda for organizing this webinar, and on behalf of our speakers and the Ontario Trial Lawyers Association, thank you for viewing our presentation and have a wonderful day.